Welcome to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll explain a horror thriller movie, Ghosts of War. Spoilers incoming. The movie begins in France during 1944. We see a group of soldiers resting. One of them, Chris, wakes up when he hears something stepping on a stick. Chris can see a shadow of a figure standing by the tree. He blinks, wondering if he's seeing things. He moves his hand for his gun while looking around his group when the figure by the tree lights up a cigarette. As he continues moving for his gun and about to unholster it, the figure flicks his lit cigarette at him, cocks his gun and points. He closes his eyes in anticipation. When he looks again, the figure's gone. The next day, the group of soldiers make their way to an outpost. They come across a jeep which explodes due to a couple of M7s they lay on the road. One of its occupants, a Nazi major, survives and Butchie challenges him to a boxing match while the rest of the group loots the dead Nazis. As they're fighting, the Nazi major gives it as good as he's getting. Butchie getting hit several times. Chris goes to blow the Nazi major's brains out to finish the fight as they're way behind and are going the wrong way. Back on the road, Chris sees movement and the soldiers gets in position again, thinking it's more Nazis. They find a group of Jewish refugees instead. One of the soldiers, Tappert, runs to meet the group, dropping his gun and taking his coat off to give it to one of the women with a child. Reaching their destination, a gorgeous mansion in front of them, Kirk comments that it's no wonder the Nazis had commandeered the place. Their guards are up when they find a body lying on the driver's seat. But the soldier was only sleeping and he immediately run for his team when he realized their relief has arrived. The other group seems to be all wound up and in a hurry to leave the place. They try to interrogate them, but the other group's jumpy and refuses to meet their eyes. As soon as they give the signal, the other group's gone. Evening comes, and the group decides to spend it in the living room, stoking the fireplace to keep warm. As they're relaxing, they hear heavy footsteps on the second floor. They look at each other before something heavy falls, which sends them scrambling to take a look. Butchie and Tappert heads for the right side of the mansion while Chris, Eugene, and Kirk head for the left side. Chris and Kirk enter a room where they hear someone dragging something on the floor. Chris goes to count before they open the door, but the door flies open. They go in and pull back a curtain. They briefly see a shadow of a body hanging by the window, but the wind blows the curtain back and it's gone. The group's back in the living room and exchanging stories. They hear another weird noise on the second floor. Chris asks if he's going crazy or the noise is something in Morse code. Eugene jots it down and the message is, "I have no legs." Chris stations Tappert on the attic since it's the best vantage point in case of a conflict and the rest can sleep in any of the beds. Kirk goes for a bedroom that probably was previously occupied by a little girl. There's a big dollhouse in one corner, a shelf filled with dolls, and a couple of pillows and teddy bears on the bed. However, instead of lying down on the bed, Kirk opts to lie down on the floor with a bag as his headrest. Suddenly, a music box starts playing with a tiny ballerina spinning on it. Eugene, on the other hand, goes down to the basement and tries to open up one of the locked chests. He finds a framed photo of the family who used to live in the mansion. He reaches for the notebook he found earlier and is reading through it when the candle he has with him goes out. He messes with his lighter and we briefly see a figure behind him. He finally gets the lighter going and relights the candle. When he straightens up, the family that was in the framed photo's gone. Tappert's in the attic, looking out the window with his gun on hand. While he's busy checking out the front yard, we briefly see a hand behind him disappearing as quickly as it appeared inside the armoire, then a figure quietly entering the room without his knowledge. Still looking around the yard, he notices a body hanging from one of the pedestal which disappears again when he goes back to look at it. Trying to look for what he saw, a distorted face comes up his viewfinder which scares him. The armoire door behind him shuts closed after. In the morning, Eugene asks if they ever found out who owned the rucksack that was left and Chris mentioned that Tappert's checking it out. Eugene tells the other two that Tappert gives him the shivers. Apparently, in Paris, a couple of 15 years old that were part of Hitler's youth were carved up by him. Tappert approaches the group to tell them that he figured out why the other group was anxious to leave. He found out from the radio that a German line's coming through from Nuremberg to go to a camp in Strasbourg. He suggests for them to gear up, hide in the woods, and wait for the Germans to pass. Chris refuses. Back in the attic, Eugene and Tappert uncovers a pentagram that was hiding under a rug. Eugene tells him that it's black magic, specifically sacrificial altars. He guesses that the Nazis committed ritualistic killings on the Hellwigs, the previous owner of the mansion. The two moves the closet from last night across the pentagram when it suddenly shuts closed, breaking 4 of Eugene's fingers on his left hand. Tappert tries to help Eugene, but the other guy blames him and pushes him back. When Tappert looks at himself on the closet door mirror, he notices a pair of feet dangling over his shoulder, but when he looks over he finds nothing. On the radio, Eugene, Chris, and Kirk hears a woman's voice threatening them. They finally accept that the things they've been seeing and experiencing aren't just their imagination. Eugene acknowledges that he finally understands why the other group was desperate to leave. They hear something creaking. This time the noise is louder. It's followed by another tapping in Morse code. Eugene goes to spell out the message. He writes, "If you leave," then stops. Out of nowhere, something takes hold of his hand and finishes it with, "You die." The radio comes on and they hear the woman's voice again, repeating the message he just wrote down. The German line arrives that night and immediately scopes out the mansion. They're about to leave when loud banging starts from the inside. None of the American soldiers causing it. The Germans alerted comes back and Tappert starts shooting them down. One of the Germans throw a grenade which Butchie covers with his body to save the others. As the group's fighting, they start noticing that the Germans are being attacked by unforeseen forces as well. Kirk finds a German soldier being drowned by a giggling voice in the bathroom. Eugene seeing another German soldier being burned alive. Tappert discovering another bound and hanging from the attic ceiling. The next night, they discuss the mansion's hauntedness. Eugene brings up the fact that everything that happened to the Germans was what was done to the Hellwigs. He even tells the group that despite the Hellwigs having French royal lineage, they were harboring Jews. When the Germans finally arrived, Mr. Hellwig was tied up on a chair in his study room, soaked in kerosene and set on fire. The son, Dieter, found in the armoire in the attic and drowned in the upstairs bathtub. The daughter, Christina, found in the servants' quarters, then dragged to the attic where she was hanged. Eugene presumes that the family's haunting the mansion because their bodies were tossed in a heap with no proper funeral or headstone. While in the basement, Chris finds the notebook that Eugene claims the Dieter wrote on. But Chris realizes that the notebook's completely empty. He asks Eugene if there's anything he wanted to tell Chris. But before they can continue, Kirk calls out for them. Butchie is conscious and keeps saying that things aren't real and that it was us. Chris asks him what he means. Butchie snaps out of the trance he's in and grabs Chris. He tells him to remember, then passes. Kirk, Eugene and Tappert tells Chris that they're not staying another night in the house. Chris suggests that they properly bury Butchie. He grabs the notebook from Eugene and finds that the notebook's filled with writing. Outnumbered, Chris orders the group to get geared up and ready to clear out. On their way out, the team realizes they're stuck in a loop when they run into the same group of Jewish refugees they saw earlier. Kirk tells Chris that they should just go back. Tappert whispers the word, Vatrulik, which Eugene hears. He asks Tappert where he heard the word and shares that Dieter mentions it in his notebook and that it's an old Muslim belief. If you let evil happen, it could come back to haunt you tenfold. They're waiting in the living room, floor covered in flour. Chris wants to know where the ghosts are going. They hear footsteps on the second floor, then see footprints on the floor. The ghost stops in front of Chris and he's dragged by it out the front yard. He's screaming for help and the others could only follow after him. Chris is taken into an outhouse where the group finds the whole family. As they're moving the bodies out to the yard, Eugene finds the last page of the notebook with one of the bodies. They bury the whole family while Eugene reads the last page. He tells the group that it turns out the Hellwigs weren't French but rather Afghans. They hid dozens of Jews in the mansion's wall and spent a fortune providing them safe passage to America. Before she dies, Mrs. Hellwig performed the Vatrulik curse against the men who just stood by and watched. When they're back in the mansion, Eugene tells Kirk and Chris that the notebook is telling something different now. Tappert is up in the attic, in the middle of the pentagram, performing some kind of ritual as the family appears in front of the other three. They try to fight off the family but their attempts prove useless. Everything starts to fluctuate. Chris finds Butchie's body screaming this isn't real. The family starts glitching and Chris finally wakes up in a hospital. He's being attended by a medical staff. Dr. Engel, the Nazi major from earlier who Butchie challenged to a boxing match, trying to calm him down as he finds himself surrounded by his unconscious group. Chris' memories start to return. They're fighting in Afghanistan about to pull out an acid, a blue-chip doctor for the Islamic State's top brass. The doctor fed them intel on 4 of their last high-value kills but his cover's blown. When they reach the house of the Hellwigs, Paul, the informant, informs the doctor to get the kids, their passport and meet them outside. However, Paul receives intel that ISIS forces are on their way from all sides and they only have 30 seconds to hide. Paul orders the family to hide them, which they do, and the ISIS forces arrive. An argument breaks out and the ISIS forces start separating the family. Chris and his group are about to intervene when more ISIS reinforcements arrive. Chris orders them not to continue and the whole group watches in their hiding spot as the family's killed. Mrs. Hellwig begging for them to help. Christina is hanged, Dieter is drowned in the sink, and Mr. Hellwig is doused in kerosene and set on fire. As the group is leaving, Mrs. Hellwig runs out carrying a bomb. Butchie tackles her but it's too late and the group is hit. Dr. Engel and his staff informs Chris that they were in a simulated reality intended to help them from their post-traumatic stress disorder. Chris realizes that their subconscious has been trying to alert them that everything wasn't real. However, what was real was the Muslim curse that Mrs. Hellwig had left for the group. The Hellwig spirits haunting their simulation. He asks for one of the medical staff to put him back in the simulation, but she refuses, telling him that she'll sedate the group instead. He explains that the family is messing with the simulation. If he doesn't help the group, they'll die. She finally agrees and asks him what he's going to do. He tells her that they'll face what they did, atone for their sins before it's too late. As the sequence is starting, the medical staff realizes that she had accidentally included the memory suppression as well, which means that when Chris is back in the simulation, he will have no memory of what just happened. She tries to tell him, but he's already losing consciousness. The movie ends with Chris back where he started, camped out at night with his group while a figure watches them from the shadows. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.